All right, we're live. We are excited to welcome Dustin Poole to our podcast this week. The episode's called "The Art of Storytelling in Biotech." Apropos both of Dustin's role as a podcaster and as the VP of Sales and Operations at Cambridge Scientific Products, which, as I understand it, you're doing like lab management and lab space, and probably also helping people, get scientific products into their labs. Our first question we always like to ask everybody who comes on is, what is on your mind? So, Dustin, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick off the conversation.
Yeah, of course. So are you sure you want to know, Eric, what's on my mind?
I don't know.
All right.
But we'll go for it. That's the format.
So truly what's on my mind right now is aliens.
Okay.
So
do they have to be green?
They can, we don't know. They could be any color, any color, shape, or form. We don't know. But I'm referring to everything that's going on right now. So you've got, this rock or this thing floating through space, hurtling through space. And what's interesting about it to me, and to bring it back to storytelling and how it's relevant here, is definitely what's happening, but also the different stories that are being told and from different perspectives. And this is something where I'm data driven, right? I'm in the scientific field. I research, I like facts. This is something where it's not really my realm, but even for people whose realm it is, we have Harvard scientists saying they're convinced it's an alien ship. And then we have everybody else saying they're not, and it's just this crazy world where we there's no facts. There's really, truly no real facts that we can have on this. And then just looking at all the different angles that people are putting out on social media. And
I actually think it's probably just their car into space. It's not actually alien.
It's a ship, but it's an empty ship. There you go.
Well, there's like a crash test dummy in it, I think.
Right.
Although I have to say, Dustin, I read somewhere, and it really kind of stuck with me, that in this postmodern world, we don't live in one reality anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? We have parallel realities and therefore parallel stories. And I think it's interesting, like for the data guy, right? And I'm a STEM person myself. For us, it's like, oh my God, this cannot be true because the data tells you this, right? But in reality, we live in kind of like a very multi-narrative environment.
Yeah, and that brings you to the Mandela effect, right? So, I mean, I've talked to so many people that are convinced he died in prison. And then, no, he's still alive.
Which his period as president or whatever he was, prime minister or president, would certainly argue against.
Yeah, exactly. He would say, nope, I'm not. I didn't. But then, all these other things. That's crazy. Yeah,
it's fascinating as you talk about it. As you were talking about the rock moving through space or whatever, spacecraft, whatever you want to call it, is. I was thinking about, it's really interesting that all science ultimately is storytelling, right? It's we basically have a set of facts, we tell a story. And I think the unique thing about science, as opposed to like the stories we tell each other, narratives that we tell each other in society in general, is that science basically says, if new facts come to light, we have to change the story.
Yep.
But when you're talking about like the rest of our days, talking to people about politics and whatever, societal issues, whatever, like the facts change and people go, and that's where you get
it is right,
theories and whatever, is because people ultimately need a story that fits with their own personal narrative, right? They're like, I believe that this is true, and therefore, if there's data that goes against what I believe, then there must be aliens or whatever
I would just say, just to just take down the pro science kind of view a little bit, as I know a lot of scientists who also come up with a story. You can't get them off the story. Like there's a lot of, we tried that before, or that'll never work, because, whatever. I see that a lot in science.
The fun thing about science is that, and a lot of people don't know this or have this perspective, but you cannot prove anything in science.
Right.
You can only disprove, and by a series of disproving over and over, you can then take this game of continuing to try and learn and grow and understand more and more about things. When I grew up, the atom was the smallest thing. Now it goes beyond. Now it goes into, like Elena was saying, interdimensional. So it's different every day.
Yeah.
Well, and some of the stuff that is, sort of considered now, there's stuff that was like, sounds like total science fiction that is like, prevailing theory at this point. I mean, black holes once upon a time were
multiverse.
Right? To be complete science fiction, and here we are.
Honestly, yeah. If you were to try to explain electricity to a caveman, and they would have told you that's magic. You can just create light by moving this object. That's magic. You're a magician. And now we know that not only is it science, it's very basic science.
I just think there's been a few things that we have flying cars, but we do not have jets in style like flying car roadways, right? And we don't have jetpacks, and even the self-driving car thing from a couple of years ago is definitely trailing behind. I was promised that I would never have to worry about being a designated driver at least 8 years ago.
Here you are, still having to sacrifice.
But on that, Dustin, what do you think? What goes first, storytelling or innovation?
Storytelling, 100%. If you look at the innovations that we have made, 90% of those were science fiction. In science fiction novels, if you read a lot of science fiction novels, they're predictors of the future. And I don't know if it's because by making those novels and having those ideas and creativity, then people chase that and they try to figure out how can we make this reality, or if it's just that creativity drives science itself. Einstein said creativity is intelligence having fun. And
it's so interesting that you say that, because so now I kind of feel good with myself that it's not like my John King, but
Kurzweil, he hasn't tried to launch himself into space yet, right? At least
he's more about becoming a robot kind of guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny though, because as you're talking, I'm remembering this story that was probably from like the 1990s of like some like Leonard Nimoy was like on the on a street corner talking on a flip phone, and everybody's like, "Oh my god!" Talking this communicator or whatever. But it's a fascinating point you're making. This like science fiction and story actually drive the course of innovation. I mean, I sometimes have said, I think that when you ask like what makes human beings fundamentally different than other animals, I often say it's because we're storytelling animals, right? Like this, and not an idea that I came up with, but I think it's true. Like we tell stories. That is what makes us really truly unique.
Being one of those types of stories.
Oh man, I tell you. Well, when all the conspiracies start to turn out to be true, you have to question that label. Maybe not all, but some of them. It's funny, Jeff. I like that you said that too about that we're storytellers. But not only are we storytellers, but we're also story listeners. And I mean, look at how much money goes into creating movies, podcasts, conversations. So we not only do we want to tell stories, but we are obsessed with hearing stories and replaying those stories. How many times have you watched your favorite movie? If you didn't enjoy listening to stories, you wouldn't just be watching that same movie over and over again, but you still get enjoyment out of and experiencing that same story.
Right. Well, and it's funny you say that, because it's always fascinating to me. Like when I'm watching a TV show, and there's something dangerous is going to happen, and like somebody's potentially about to die, and they didn't die because there's still like 3 hours left in the movie, like, and you're just like, wow, but you're able to use the word like mimetic, kind of empathy that I feel this, this thing that's happening. I almost feel like it's happening to me.
Yeah.
And so
can I pick it up here and draw a parallel a little bit from the empathy and something that's happening to me, storytelling, over to selling?
I was thinking the exact same thing, Elena. So you take it away.
Take the words right out of my mouth. You go.
No. I want to hear you. I want to hear yours, and then I'll add in.
So, I'm looking at it from the perspective of when you want to sell somebody, you want to engage, and you're just kind of using your story to engage with the person and just trying to be where they are and bridge to them and try to just get them to stop what they're doing and relate. But then I'm not a salesperson. So here I'm talking to a VP of sales and operations. So you tell me how I should look at it.
Well, Elena, your instincts are spot on. So the New York Times did an article that was based on, I don't remember who did the actual research, but they put out an article on this, and it was, I think, over 80,000 pieces of viral content. And, content is made to sell something. You're selling, you're buying their product, which is their video, with your time. Mm-hmm. And so what they're selling is, and what we might be selling is a relevant thing in common, and they elicited one of 5 emotions in the viewers. And I don't remember all of them, but it was fear, of course, humor, sadness, inspiration, and I cannot remember the other one, but it was one of those 5 emotions.
What do you say, Eric?
I don't think it was discussed. No, I think it was
thinking something like success or
well, I think that fell into motivation or inspiration.
Yeah.
But essentially, and based on those different emotions, you would do something. So whether you liked it, whether you shared it, or whether you commented, it was anger. That drives you to the
main one.
Exactly, probably the main one, especially these days. But so eliciting those emotions, you're forcing engagement because we feel as viewers compelled to react to that. So then, as a VP of sales, my mind goes to, how do I use that in selling? Mm-hmm. And so you have to integrate that and think about how do you, and us as podcasters, how do we integrate that into our content? And so through multiple different channels, through tons of research, I found that there's actually a formula, a viral formula. And I've seen different versions of this, but it all comes down to 3 things: the hook. So you got to capture their attention right off the bat. If you don't, you're not going anywhere. Build suspense, and then the payoff. Mm-hmm. And so if you do those 3 things, you will have a viral piece of content. If you do those 3 things accurately. And so the hardest thing that I've found, with not even just through myself, but watching others try to follow this formula, is how to hold off on the payoff until the very end. Mm-hmm. You have to give them the payoff and then end it, close it out. And it looks different. A 30-second video looks completely different than an hour-long podcast, but they still have the same formula. You still have the hook. In a podcast, it might be 20 minutes long. That's just going to be a background. We're going to talk about, why do you want to watch this? What are you going to get out of this? This is all the hook. The suspense.
So I thought, by the way, you were going to say, Dustin, that the formula was pissing off scientists.
I mean, that works.
Yeah,
that could be. That's just
not
the hook.
Working at all times.
Always.
It's interesting, Dustin, and I was thinking that, like, how do you hold them right until that payoff? And I wonder if that's where you kind of go around their experiences and what they may be missing and what they may want to have, and just kind of dig deeper into their experiences. Is that roughly?
So the way
there's that very manipulative approach that I've seen in some videos where they're like, and I will tell you the thing.
That's what I was gonna say.
But before I do that,
that's
and then
easy. Come on,
you're like 45 minutes into a 2-hour sales pitch, and you're like, what did I just do?
So that's a good point, but there is I guess an ethical way to do that, and it would be similar. So you just have the mini payoffs. So as you go, maybe it's, I'm going to show you 10 ways to sell better, or to sell. I'm going to show you 10 ways to sell without selling your soul. And so then each one you're going to have a hook. So now I'm going to tell you how to sell to pharma without, and then, or now I'm going to tell you how to sell to academia without selling your soul, or just these different steps that lead you to this full picture. The whole time, there's going to be number 10. And then of course, at the beginning, say, stick around for number 10, because that one's going to blow your mind.
Right.
So, and then they leave it off at the end.
No,
right. And then the
what'd you say,
podcast
Elena?
like
You're so slick.
it glitches out before you get number 10.
Yeah, it glitches. Oh, come back next time for the second.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, so I was teaching marketing at UMass Boston last year, and I hate textbooks, and so I ended up using these, 2 books, one of which was quite old. It was a Philip Kotler on marketing book that was like 25 years old or whatever, but I needed something really basic. And the other one was this book by Seth Godin called This is Marketing. And he says this really interesting thing in there, that ultimately he says that marketing boils down to this very simple idea, which is that people like me do things like this. In other words, you have to figure out, how do I tell a story to this potential customer, or potential client, potential consumer, of how do I get them to believe that people like them do the thing that I'm telling them to do. And if you can't do that, they ultimately won't buy. And so I'm interested in your reaction to it, because I think that actually plays out in sales calls, all the time. Like if people are like, yeah, I don't need, I don't need this equipment or whatever, I'm not going to buy it,
Oh yeah, that's sales 101. So if you can, let's say I'm trying to sell into a lab at Harvard and a Harvard Medical School, and it's a specific piece of equipment, and they're maybe it's a newer manufacturer. So this new lab, they don't really know about it. If I come in and say, well, last week I was in the George Church lab reviewing this piece of equipment, and they said they really liked this about it. Now I'm very subtly saying George Church approves of this piece of equipment, or the George Church lab approves of this piece of equipment. Now they're putting themselves, of course they want to put themselves in George Church's shoes. They're like, oh right. Yeah, well,
but of course, George Church probably hasn't set foot in his own
he hasn't
company.
even, yeah, exactly.
But see, the interesting thing is also here you're creating a desire. Right?
Exactly.
And you're creating somebody to look up to. So perhaps it becomes the people like you. So they are thinking like, oh, well, that would make me successful.
Right. Well, or people like you, or people who you want to be or wish you were,
right.
I guess. Is
and Eric probably knows this, because I've been driving everybody crazy with this. Like, I have this whole thing, I keep talking about this idea of identity as like fundamentally what sort of drives everything, right? And I think that idea of people like me is people like me / people like I want to be like. I want to identify as scientists or successful founders or whatever it is. Get somebody, if I can figure out who it is they want to be and how my product helps them become that thing that they want to be, mentally they're like, it's worth it because this is getting me where I want to go. Whereas if they're like, I don't want to, with that, what's the ultimate thing that causes people not to buy something? Like, I don't want to be the sucker that spent, $100,000 on this thing that doesn't work. In fact, I don't even want to be the sucker who spent $15 on a thing that doesn't work, right? Like, how angry do we get when we go and we buy even like a sandwich and it's terrible, right? It's because it's like, I feel like
a stale Twinkie.
Oh yeah, that'd be terrible.
But I feel like I've been duped. It has an impact on like I was not able to be the person that I wanted to be in this moment. Now I'm ticked off.
It's interesting you say that, Jeff, because there's been numerous studies done that show physiologically humans will avoid losing something more before they will try to gain something. So if you can reframe it that way, that it's a FOMO, fear of missing out. Right. If you can frame it in a way that, okay, you don't want to lose this, you don't want to miss out on this, they're much more likely to buy than if you say, hey, this is going to be great for you, you're going to love this.
Yeah, I think that was a Kahneman Tversky observation. Those guys, yeah.
I think it's perfectionism in humanity, right?
Yeah.
But I could hear it.
I follow this really phenomenal group. I'm actually in there on School. I had mentioned School earlier, which is an app for communities, and I follow. I don't know if you guys have heard of the School of Hard Knocks. The young man James Dumoulin, who he's interviewed Shaq and Barbara Corcoran. Recently, he did Will Smith, just big top name people. But he started out and still does interview millionaire, billionaire entrepreneurs, and what he does is exactly what you were saying before. He wants you to believe you could be that person. And so he's asking them, these entrepreneurs, questions. How did you become this? What setbacks did you have? How did you make it through? What motivates you? These types of questions. And by doing that, by asking those questions, it makes the viewer feel like they're asking these millionaire, billionaire questions. And if they can only just have the answer, they could become that person. And so it's very interesting what you guys were saying, because it aligns very much with that. And the group that I'm in, so I guess I'm one of them, is called the School of Mentors, because the idea is now he brings in these entrepreneurs to talk to the people within his community, and you're able to ask them questions live. And I've gotten to ask these billionaires questions, it's just phenomenal, really cool. And so that's what he's selling, and it's working very well.
Well, and when you think about this, even from the perspective of like, I am not an elite athlete by any means, but I'm going to wear my Nikes, and it makes me feel like I am sort of like
I can play basketball.
It's interesting because what that means is you also have to set up, like, for better or for worse, we won't get into the dark side of this comment, is for better or for worse, when you set up that story, you have to set up the villain as well. Like, you have to set up people, you have to set up who's the in crowd, but you also have to set up the out crowd, right?
Yeah.
We're going to buy these kinds of lab things that make the lab function. Or do you want to be like, Joe, who's, terrible science, but let's get his PhD, whatever, whatever it is. But how do you have to set up that, it's like a typical sort of story arc kind of thing. Like, there has to be this, you have to have this tension in your, in the story you're telling in order to, create the sales. And what I think often is a challenge for companies, and Eric, I think, we run into this in our business as well, is when you're trying to sell, it is very easy to get into this mode of like, I will take any customer because I need the money, whatever it is. But in the end of the day, you don't sell because you take any customer. You sell because you pick, this is the customer that I have, and you set both the.
I actually think that you have to pick a customer for a success, right?
Yeah.
Because then you have a customer and you have something to say.
Yep. And here's what happens if you discount. You're gonna have a lot of those. And guess what? If you give in and you go with that customer, I promise you that they're gonna be more difficult. They're gonna want it faster. They're gonna ask more questions. And at the end of the day, there's a good chance they're going to walk away, and they probably were using you to get a better price out of their actual vendor that they're working with. You don't have to say yes to everyone. Not all customers that are very high value, they're easy to work with, than 20 customers who are all difficult and eat up all your time and energy.
And not only
that believe you have something to offer.
I was just saying, not only easy to work with, but they're happy with what you offer them, because that definition means they want more. They will tell their friends and all that you want out of them, right?
Well,
so one of the stories in the world right now is that AI is going to come and take over the world. So in that vein, Jeff, you are AI co-host.
Let's hear it.
Absolutely. Let's see. I asked the question a little bit differently today. I said, what are 5 funny questions we can ask on a podcast episode, The Art of Storytelling in Biotech? So my disclaimer is always, I did not write these. So they're great.
but you chose to read
if they're
them.
great, I wrote the prompt, and if they're not great, I don't know what ChatGPT is doing. All right. So how about this? If you had to sell your products to a 5-year-old or to an investor who acts like a 5-year-old, which would be harder?
Well, the second one, second one, I would say is probably pretty
Sadly, it
accurate.
happens all the time. Exactly.
Interesting, and I will answer the question, but before I do, I want to talk about a podcast that I had started called Translation, which has kind of evolved into selling science. And the goal of that was to translate science into something that the general public and that policymakers and young people could understand. So I'm very familiar with this topic. And it's funny, the reason that I discovered there was a gap, anytime you want to create something or build something or start a company, there needs to be a gap. The reason I realized that there was this gap is I would be explaining, this has been for decades, trying to explain what my job is and to family members and friends. And I'd be going and everything seems good and they're following along. You see they're nodding. And then all of a sudden at one point, inevitably, they will always glaze over. And you can tell that they just gave up on trying to keep up and understand. And it's not their fault. It's my fault because I wasn't telling the story. I wasn't explaining it in a way that they could really, truly understand. And so, I started to get into really almost like allegories this is like, DNA is like building a house. And I would go into the whole, and I won't give you the whole spiel, but, and I would go into trying to explain why DNA is like building a house. Oh, okay. So that's what you do. Now I understand. You're writing blueprints or you're reading blueprints. And okay, that makes sense. So if I had to try to sell a piece of equipment, I guess it would depend on how complex it is, but let's just go with a pipette, a simple pipette. So if I was trying to sell that to a 5-year-old, I would first of all get down on their level. Because if I'm standing over them and explaining something to them that's technical and maybe a little scary, that would be a little impeding, and I wouldn't want to do that. So I'd get down on their level. I would do a demonstration. I would show them how it works, why it works, and I would do it in a way that they could understand and enjoy. So I'd probably get some colored water, and a pipette is the whole point of a pipette, liquids with different colors, and then let them play with it. And then
would you tell them that this is the pipette brand that Moana uses or something? That's just if
I had to. Whatever it takes to make the sale.
It's kind of like the George Church of
yeah. When I was
so I will. My second question, sort of relevant to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, is every good story needs a villain. In biotech, who's the real antagonist? The grant reviewer, the pipette, the world that you're in.
Yeah, so I would say the real villain in biotech would be time, and I would say the real villain in all of our lives is time. And at the end of the day, a researcher who's really dedicated and wants to, these people are doing work that is changing the world. They're saving lives. They're saving, pediatric cancer researchers are saving children's lives from cancers. It's not a matter of how driven they are or how motivated they are. It's a matter of time. And they would do it forever if they had all the time in the world. But at the end of the day, you have to finish it. The problem is money is finite. So maybe it's money, but money is finite. So even if they had all the time in the world, if they ran out of money to pay themselves, they can't keep doing it. So there's always that deadline. So the villain is absolutely.
So it's interesting, Dustin, because you did not say that the villain is the disease. Why is that?
Because without the disease, there'd be no research. Without the disease, there would be no jobs for these researchers. There'd be no problem to solve. I think that obviously, to cure all diseases would be the ultimate goal. And George Church is working on that, by the way, in a very innovative way. You have to read his book. What is it? I can't think of the book, but it's really, Regenesis. Really great book. And he talks about a way to cure all diseases, but it could backfire. I won't spoil the end. I won't give you. No, it's not that, but that is a good point. No, it's genetics. He's a genomicist. So it's all based on genetics. But where we go? Oh, so the disease is not the enemy necessarily, or it's not the villain. I think that it's a natural part of life. You can't have life without death. You can't have joy without pain. These I heard an interesting quote you guys might like. So someone was asked, I really wish that life was just flat and just, we got these ups and we got these downs. I don't want to have moments where I'm just so happy, moments where I'm so sad. Why can't we just be neutral and just be, baseline happy all the time? And they said, well, think about it.
That's awful.
Yeah, I know, right? Literally, that's exactly it. That's the punchline. But just think about it like a heart monitor. You've got your ups. There's no life. You have to have that.
I used to hear another scientific analogy of like homeostasis, or not homeostasis, equilibrium equals death. Right?
Yeah.
When everything is all not moving because it's all in the right place.
Well, it's interesting because I remember reading a book some years ago about this idea that sort of evolution basically happens on the fringes of environments. It doesn't happen in a static environment because there's no reason to evolve anymore, right? But I actually want to go back to your point about time. And I was thinking about, a couple of years ago, before Eric and I started our business, we were having a conversation with a company. One of the things that we were talking about was this idea of, basically helping small lab, or small, scientific labs accelerate the essentially becoming sort of a one-stop shop that can plug in and do all these things for people so that you don't have to waste all your time setting them up, doing the legal contracts or whatever, because at the end of the day, to your point, is when you are a small, say, therapeutics company or whatever, the issue is that the biggest issue for you is that you're going to run out of money.
Yep.
And therefore, you have a finite amount of time. And so what you should be focusing on as a support, company for that is how do I help these people who are under, on a clock where, where the money is going to run out at a certain time? How do I get them to see that my product is going to help them move faster, that my service helps them move faster? Because it's fascinating right now what's going on in the biotech world, right? Like all these layoffs that are happening because companies are like, I need to slow the clock down. Yes, they're going to run out of money, but the issue is ideally, you're just like, okay, I'm going to take the money I have and throw all these people out and then move this as fast as possible. But right now, because there's no money to be had, I need to make the money that I have last as long as possible. So I don't know whether it's whether it's time or the money, but I think they are inextricably linked. Like you have.
Yeah. And the thing is, with more time, you can make more money. So I would default back to time is the enemy. It is time, because if you could have more time, you can just make more money. And to your point, Jeff, a lot of these people, like you said, they're bounce back, rebounds, because that's the expectation, and everybody fully believes that. So again, it comes right back.
There's a lot of people telling themselves stories that just aren't going to come true, though. It's like, if I can just make this last, then the VCs will give me in. That's just like oftentimes not going to happen. Dustin, I we can continue this. We are over time on the main part of the conversation. So I'm going to kick off our end segment where we go around and ask everyone to say one thing they want to leave our audience with. We always start with our guest. But what's one thing you'd like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, so I guess just staying on topic and if using the time that you have to the best of your ability and getting the most out of that, spend time with people that matter and make the biggest impact that you can.
Awesome. Dustin, we always like to ask if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. I'm pretty active on there. If you send me a message, I'll definitely reply.
Awesome. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I guess my one thing that I'll leave with is I'm going to kind of go to this idea that sort of came up through the conversation of see themselves sort of, or see your product role in their story, right? Like, that sort of people like me do things like this kind of thing. Like I need this product, as opposed to somebody just trying to get me to buy something because they want to sell something. They want to get me to buy it because it's going to help me become or be the person that I believe I'm supposed to. I will pass it to Elena.
So I would kind of build on it and go back to the concept that you were talking about, that a good payout, right? And an interesting thing that crossed my mind as I was trying to process it is we women, stereotypically but true, don't like villains. And therefore, often my story and our stories are a bit of a rosy unicorns. And I am going to kind of think about it and possibly even chat with you some drama, and the juxtaposition is useful. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So, my one thing is, this might be a little bit left field, but you did get off with Alien, so it's all good, right? There's this thing that we were talking in the beginning about, telling the story of science, and that how some, by creating this sort of interest in that direction, or maybe reflecting an interest in the direction, but there's also sort of a negative side there where I see there's like, at least something I've been thinking about recently, is there's like a lack of imagination sometimes in what can be done. There's this concept of abundance, in other words, like if we solve fusion, nuclear fusion, building the right kinds of farms, etc., like we could be in a position where everybody, the rising tide lifts all boats. But I do feel like right now the stories that are being told are more in the mode, and like how, be interesting. So, less on the selling side, although I suspect there's a way to apply it back to that, but just in the way we tell stories, how do we convince people that we can actually do something that's good and that's valuable at the same time? Dustin, thank you so much for joining us. This was a blast. Active.
Yeah, it was great, and you guys gave me some perspective as well, so appreciate it.
Awesome.
You
Thanks.
be well.